What you're reading this morning. If you want to tell them what you're reading this morning.
Oh, thank you. All right. Yes, thank you. Good morning. August the 18th of 2020. We're reading the first 3 chapters of Esther today in our one-year daily Bible. 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verses 17 through 34. Psalms 35, verses 17 through 28. And Proverbs 21, 19 through 20. Thank you. Made it easy to tell you all what we're reading. We're starting the book of Esther this morning. So we finished up Nehemiah, reading in our one-year Bible. And this morning I had a little extra time. I woke up a little extra earlier than I normally have been lately, and just kind of said, Lord, I get excited reading Esther. Yes, Caroline, thank you so much for letting us know about your brother. Have been praying for you and so sorry you lost your brother. Love that picture of the two of you, though. Thank you for sharing him with us all. We'll continue to pray for you and your family, Caroline. So anyway, I get excited reading about Esther. Who doesn't like the story of Esther, the way we've glamorized it? And it's really what we've done is we've glamorized it. But, in the end, how do I want to say this? In the end, God wins. I guess that's what I want to say. In the end, God wins. In the end, God's people wins. That's one of the things that during this virus that's been going around, during all of the things that are happening in our world in the year 2020, it's one of the things that's been on my heart a lot as I'm reading, and that is the fact that we keep reading about these situations. We read about the wars. We read about the rebuilding of the wall. We read about the rebuilding of the temple. We read about, this evil king and that evil king and what this evil king did and how this evil king led them into such, and it's so easy to sit here and, step outside of myself and see our situation in the middle of that situation, or see that situation in the middle of our situation, whichever way you want to look at it. And this year, it's like God just continually reminds me that we win. We win. God's still God. God's plan prevails. Whether we choose to follow God's plan or not, He leaves that up to us. He didn't make us a puppet on a string. He gives us free choice. And so I was, thinking about Esther. Of course, my husband, Tom, is a day ahead of us anyway. I chose to just follow this written book the way it's laid out because this is a leap year. So we had an extra day in February that's not in the written book. The online versions accounted for leap year where this one doesn't. So I've got lots and lots of people that follow along in the written book. So I opted. So for me, my Bible, where I've numbered our days, says we're on day 230, but in reality, because of leap year, we're on day 231. So yesterday, Tom had pointed out to me, we're going to read Esther. And so I like reading about Queen Esther. I like reading about the heroine who saved all of her people. And we've glamorized it. They've made movies about it. When they make the movies about it, it's all about the glamour. It's all about she becomes queen. And just the term queen kind of puts an air about it. But this morning, I had a little extra time. It was like, Lord, I kind of have a feeling I skip over a lot of things you want me to see because I just want to get to the part about Queen Esther. I just want to. And so I don't know where it's going to take me. One of the things that came to mind this morning is how in these first 3 chapters we pretty well finished the story of Esther. And yet there's a whole lot more. But yet when I think of the book of Esther in the Bible, I just think about that small part of it, about what we read about today, about how Esther was an orphan, her uncle took her in, and then she got taken to the king's court, and then he chose her. He chose her above all the others. She found favor with the king. Now, last year was the first year that it kind of hit me about what really took place. You know, and I think probably I was reading this year with an eye towards, did Mordecai hear from God to put her up for the king? Because obviously Mordecai is a mighty man of God. But you do realize what he did with Esther, right? One night with the king. So as this year when I was reading, I also was reminded that the way they did things back then isn't the way we do things now. Back then, marriages were arranged. It wasn't that, oh, I hope I find the right person and I get to try out half a dozen or so before I find the right one and marry him. No, oftentimes the marriages were arranged. So then, is it such a big deal that Esther become married to the king in the manner in which she did? I don't know. I'm just sharing some thoughts. And then as I continued on, I read just a little bit slower this morning. In fact, I listened first, and then I listened again, and then I read. Because if you're on the YouVersion app or some of the online apps that has this 10-day or 1-year reading plan on it, there's voice for it. So it's audio as well as written for us. And if you understand, audio uses a different part of your brain than writing does, the same as audio uses a different part of your brain than what reading does. Oftentimes I gather a little bit different as I'm reading or listening. So anyway, to my point, I'm dragging this out way too long. It doesn't give us a lot of background about the king in today's reading. It just starts off with this celebration that lasted 180 days. And it was a tremendous display of opulent wealth of his empire and the pomp and splendor of his majesty. And I found it interesting that today we read about a wife who refuses the wishes of her husband, even though they were king and queen, they were husband and wife, right after a day when we had such strong lessons about divine alignment. In fact, we've had several days of lessons about divine alignment within our marriage, within our home. I found it interesting that then today we're reading about where a wife refuses to submit to her husband. And yet when you read, this is a tremendous display of opulent wealth. And the king put no limits on the drinking. That's verse 8. For the king had instructed all of his palace officials to serve each man as much as he wanted. And then on the 7th day, when the king was in high spirits, verse 10 says, because of the wine, he then told the 7 eunuchs to go and get Queen Vashti. And the reason it's given, there's even a reason. He wanted the nobles and all the other men to gaze on her beauty, for she was a very beautiful woman. Oh, my nose is itching. Love live videos. He wanted all of the other men. He was putting her on display. So then the thought came to my mind, God's ways are just. God's ways are right. God doesn't make any mistakes. God tells us to submit to our husbands. Now, he tells our husbands to submit to us. We are to submit to one another. I think it was yesterday I made a big point that if there's a conflict and we don't reach an agreement, that it is my role as the completer for my husband to submit to his wishes, and then I turn it over to the Lord and God takes care of it. I believe that with all my heart. And then I'm faced with a situation that a drunk husband is wanting his wife to come in and parade her beauty. Does she have the right to say no? And we're not hearing in today's reading a whole lot, not here in the beginning for sure, about God said, or we prayed and God said. It's not that the king prayed and said, Lord, what should I do next? Oh, okay, I'll bring Queen Vashti in. No, that's not the way this happened. And I feel like the Lord reminded me once again that in all things, we seek him first. I say it over and over and over again. I don't submit to my husband simply because I'm submitting to a man, simply because the law was written somewhere for me to submit to him. I submit to my husband as unto the Lord. That's what this book teaches me to do. I'm submitting unto the Lord when I submit to my husband, just as when he submits to me, which happens a lot. It's not me he's honoring. It is the Lord that he honors when he submits to me. When you really put God first in your life, when you are really to the place that they could take your life, and you know that you're his, God Almighty's. We're submitting unto the Lord. When you're there, then I'm going to tell you that day by day, step by step, God will guide you when to submit, when not to submit. The Bible has a lot to say about women who are married to unsaved men and to men who are married to unsaved women. First and foremost, he tells us that we're not to leave. But if they leave, we let them go. And then if we are not to leave, we are to follow what this book tells us about marriage. And so what I believe this book tells us, whether it's marriage, whether it's finances, whether it's ministry, whether it's business, whether it's raising our children, whatever it is, in all facets of life, it is seek ye first the kingdom, and all these things will be added unto you. And so I don't know whether Queen Vashti prayed and said, Lord, do I go? The king is summoning me. I don't know. It doesn't say. But I am saying to you, especially those of you who may be married to somebody who is not saved, who is not a believer, who isn't following God, that it has to be a minute by minute prayerful thing you do. God will guide your every step. So back to the reading. The reading is this king. The celebration lasted 180 days, was a tremendous display. In his high spirits, because of the wine, he calls for his wife, the queen, to come and be put on display. And she refuses to come. And it made him furious. And he burned with anger. And in his anger, he made a hasty decision. And he wrote her off. And then it says, after the wine wore off, my paraphrasing, he started regretting what he did. So they come up with this plan. The people who is serving the king, who wants to bow to his every wish, comes up with this plan that then Esther gets involved in. And so I just, again, in seeking the Lord, this is what I believe he was showing me. for whatever happened leading up to this point in time when the king is obviously very wealthy. Things are going good. I mean, he evidently is at a place of peace, not at war during this time, because he had 180 days to just have this opulent display of wealth going on. And how often all of us fall prey to the temptations at a period of time like that. When things are going good, when things aren't going good, we pray. When we don't have any other place to turn, isn't that sad? It's sad that sometimes it takes the fact that we don't have any place else to turn. I mean, even in our everyday language, I don't even know what else to do, so I'll pray. That is so backwards. It is so backwards. The first thing we should do is pray. The best thing we can do for anybody is pray. And yet we make it sound as though, oh, well, there's nothing else we can do. There's no hope. So, well, at least I can pray. I'm sorry, there's nothing else I can do, but I'll pray. That is so backwards. And I think that that's what we're seeing here. I wrote in my column this morning, pride is the downfall of the haughty. Pride. We all have to guard against that. We all have to guard against that, getting so settled in and so comfortable. We'll go to great extremes for what we believe is our own comfort. We don't like change. We don't like things to be different. We'll go to extremes to keep from making that change. And yet, if we don't change, we're going to end up in the extreme. Because God never leaves us where we're at. He never leaves us where we're at. We were created to continually get more and more and more like Him. Forward movement, progress. You show me somebody who is not making progress in their life, and I'll show you somebody who is dying a slow death. And then we move forward and we progress to this point where, it doesn't feel like we even need God anymore. And we'll do stupid things like put on a 180-day drunken show for the world. So, I don't know. That's a whole lot of what I got out of this morning. And then, the Corinthians just... there was a church that also, the Corinth church was one of the fastest growing churches. They started out with a fire and zeal for Jesus. And then here we are, 1 Corinthians 11, verse 17. But in the following instructions, I, Paul, cannot praise you, Corinthians, for it sounds as if more harm than good is done when you meet together. You ever been to a church like that? I have. More harm than good was done when they meet together. First, I hear that there are divisions among you. Divisions among you. I mean, the Bible tells us that we are to pursue peace. The Bible tells us that we are called to be the peacemakers, not the pot stirrers. I hear that there are divisions among you when you meet as a church, and to some extent, I believe it. Then he says, but then, of course, there must be divisions among you so that you who have God's approval will be recognized. See, if there was no evil in the world, we wouldn't even know what good is. There are people that condemn God and disavow God simply because He created evil. But if there was no evil, how would we call anything good? If there was no contrast. And that's what he's saying right there. When you meet together, you're not really interested in the Lord's Supper. We've all known people that their whole purpose in going to church isn't about glorifying God. We've all probably, to a degree, at some point in time in our life, been guilty of the very things he's talking to the Corinthians about. I just thank God that he loves us enough to correct us. I thank God that as I read in the book of Esther today, I'm reminded what happens when pride sets in. What happens when we get full of ourselves. I'm reminded about the brokenness of mankind without God. And Psalms just goes right along with it. Psalms 35:17. How long, O Lord, will you look on and do nothing? Rescue me from their fierce attacks. If we keep our eyes focused on the media, if we keep our eyes focused on the neighborhood chatter, if we keep our eyes focused on social media, the next thing you know, we're going to be feeling like that. How long, Lord, are you going to look on and do nothing? The attacks are coming from everywhere. It's doom and gloom. There can't be any hope. There can't be any future. Oh my gosh, the world's coming to an end. It's never been this bad. So we have a few days that we read and we're corrected by the Lord. Proverbs 21:19. It's better to live alone in the desert than with a quarrelsome, complaining wife. That Too bad y'all couldn't see the look on my husband's face. Yes, Lord. It's better to, I'll repeat it. Which I was going to say, didn't we just read this just a week or so ago? It's a repeat in the Proverbs. It's better to live alone in the desert than with a quarrelsome, complaining wife. The wise have wealth and luxury, but fools spend whatever they get. Oh, it's good to be able to laugh. It's good to be able to just have hope and know that God is still God, no matter what's going on. So I hope you guys have a terrific Tuesday. Thanks for letting me share this morning.